Almost 5 years removed from being fired from the show, Shane Gillis will be hosting Saturday Night Live in late February. And this complete cultural arc circle of sorts is not only hilarious to think about, but also, in my opinion, culturally important to know. To understand the story, we got to go back to 2019. Shane Gillis, blossoming comedian. SNL looks at him and goes, okay, this guy may be next up. And they weren't wrong. They were not wrong at all. So Shane Gillis gets the call that everybody wants as a comedian. He gets a call from SNL. SNL calls him up and goes, hey, we want you to come work for us. He goes, he's a writer, he's in the writer's room and whatnot. He also has the chance to be on screen because, he seems like a guy that passes the audition, the infamous SNL audition. It seems like he could be a guy that could be on the cast and whatnot. You may know the story by now. 3 days after Shane Gillis was announced as hired by SNL, he was fired by SNL. The show that birthed so many comedians throughout the years, Shane Gillis held the shortest employment in the history of the show. I don't know that for sure, but I would assume so. 3 days, that was it. Walk in, walk out. That was it for Shane Gillis. Now, what happened? Well, people, this was peak cancel culture, right? 2019, people got off on this stuff. They were like, they love digging up clips, taking clips out of context, jokes out of context, digging them up. And Shane Gillis, when he got hired, somebody went back and found some podcasts from his podcast, our Matt and Shane's secret podcast, and people deemed it as, something that SNL did not want to associate with, even though they were jokes and whatnot, but they called them racist, homophobic, misogynist. You know the buzzwords by now, all right? You know them all. They called them all of it, transphobic. We could keep going and going and going. He was labeled it all and he was fired. And let's just say Shane Gillis pretty much handled it as well as one could. He thanked SNL for his time. He said he was grateful. And on top of it, he even released a statement saying, I'm a comedian who pushes boundaries. I sometimes miss. If you go through my 10 years of comedy, most of it bad, you're going to find a lot of bad misses. I'm happy to apologize to anyone who's actually offended by anything I've said. My intention is never to hurt anyone, but I am trying to be the best comedian I can be, and sometimes that requires risks. This was from September 12th, 2019, and not everyone was a fan of his, I wouldn't even call it an apology, just his statement. Vanity Fair wrote an article that said, SNL hire Shane Gillis doesn't quite apologize for racist, homophobic remarks. Now, it's kind of funny to look back on, but look, 5 years ago was a much different culture. Those articles from the Vanity Fairs of the world, they mattered. Like there were the few, the strong, that would look at those and be like, who cares? Shane Gillis, one of them. But for the most part, people will look at that and be like, we can't have that. No, don't call me those words. Please, 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 please. Now, one important thing to note about Shane Gillis is he never apologized, okay? He never went on this apology tour, which I'm sure he even was pressured to do so. He never went out and said, hey, guys, I'm so sorry for my remarks and I'm listening, I'm learning. He never did that. He did say, hey, I'll apologize to people who felt as if they were directly targeted by my jokes and I'll have a conversation with you, probably friends and whatnot. But he never went out and said, I'm sorry directly for this clip from my podcast in 2018. He never said that. And from 2019 to 2024, Shane Gillis just blew up. The guy's massive now, all right? He's been on Joe Rogan, I don't know how many times, a lot. His podcast that SNL looked at and said, oh, this is disgusting. This is not the comedy we want. That podcast is huge. A lot of the episodes have over 1 million views on YouTube. Who knows how many audio listens they have? Probably enough. A lot of them probably have over 1 million. He's selling out shows all over the country. I'm sure he could go international. It's a big deal, all right? He blew up. And ironically enough, SNL went the opposite direction, all right? They kind of went, Shane went like this, and SNL went like this, I don't know if I'm doing this right, but I was up here, and then, yeah. I'm doing it right. There you go. A little show and tell for you guys. Now, I don't have to be the first to tell you that Saturday Night Live hasn't been great over the past, I don't know, decade or so. Ever since Kate McKinnon, is that her name? She wore a white pantsuit and did the things. She went on the piano after Trump won. They've been nothing but that was the end. That was the end. And they had the funniest president in the history of the world, and they somehow didn't even make him funny. I don't have to tell you about Saturday Night Live not being great. But what I find even funnier was not Saturday Night Live's, kind of fall. They're not irrelevant. They still have a lot of people who watch the show. I'll give them credit. 3 to 4 million every episode. Not as good as it once was, but that's not a bad number. That's not a number you scoff at, all right? Especially on 11:30 p.m. on a Saturday night. But I will laugh at those that directly went at Shane Gillis and not only celebrated him getting removed from the show, but also kind of took it as an opportunity to pat themselves on their woke back. And that includes the person who started all of this. The person that tweeted the video that eventually resulted in Shane Gillis being fired from SNL is a guy by the name of Seth Simons. Now, Seth Simons is a failed comedian turned comedy journalist, which whatever. We're going to continue to get into him. But he had this tweet that I'm showing you right now. That was the tweet that really, got people talking. If that tweet never goes out, who knows what what happens with Shane Gillis. I'm not saying people wouldn't have dug up stuff, but this was the one. This was the catalyst. And Seth Simons, after this, didn't really have a great go at it. All right. He was accused of being an incredible creep to comedians, female comedians. One of his heroes, Mark Norman, pretty much called him a complete, shill. He said, "You're a failed comedian. Now you pretend to be a journalist." Speaking of the journalism work, I guess you would say, of Seth Simons, he writes this big time think piece. He calls it, listen to this. Comedy has an alt-right problem. Ugh. Not everybody agrees with me in my tofu eating ways in Brooklyn. Too bad. But here's the funny part about this. This big time piece, the ones, 3,500 words, it's somehow it took them 3 months to write. Within this, one of his big sources, it turns out, was just a catfish. This man didn't get catfished by somebody in the dating world. He got catfished by a source. The source was just fake. It wasn't real. It was somebody that he found on a forum. And the guy was fake. That was who he used for one of his big think pieces. A source from a forum. Then he takes a break from the internet. And speaking of other ironic things about this guy, before he put out the Shane Gillis video that went mega viral and whatnot, he deleted 7,000 tweets. I wonder why, Seth Simons. I wonder why. Now, he was the one who started this dance, right? He was the one that kind of was the first domino. But there were others that also looked like complete fools by the end of this after patting themselves on their woke back, like I said. And as it turns out, they were not as perfect as they thought they were. There was Simu Liu. He tweeted, "It wasn't funny then, and it sure as hell isn't funny today. This world has been so used to dehumanize my people for over 150 years, you don't get to use it in the name of edgy comedy. Like the other members of my community, I am eagerly awaiting NBC SNL's response." As it turns out, this is the same individual who compared being, gay and being a pedophile. He said it's the same thing, and not in a joking way like Shane Gillis. He had Reddit comments saying being a part of the LGBTQ community is the same thing as being a pedophile. Those were dug up just not too long after his tweet about Shane Gillis, and that didn't look good for him. Then there was Judy Gold from CNN, who wrote a think piece that said, firing Shane Gillis wasn't political correctness. As it turns out, in 2015, Judy Gold had quite the take on Nicki Minaj's race. Now, it's funny to look back on these people that went right at Shane Gillis and wanted to essentially ruin his career and looking at the skeletons they had in their past, but that's not the point of this video. It is important and part of the story because, as it turns out, the people that attack like that usually have some things in their past that they would never want to be attacked. But what I look at this from Shane Gillis, I see two things. One, the value of Shane Gillis never saying sorry is profound in this moment. He stuck by his guns. He said, I'm a comedian. At that point in time, the joke that I told on my podcast, I thought was funny, but it turns out it wasn't. And I have to push the line. And if you don't like it, that's fine. That's fair. And if you don't like it and you think I should be removed from your show, okay, but I'm not going to change. I'm going to keep pushing. And I'm going to push the line as much as I can as a comedian. And you may label me as things, but I'm not going to change. And there was a time from 2016, and it was even a little bit before that, to, and I'll get to this point where we are now, where people would change. They felt that pressure, and they had to come out and give these statements saying, no, I'm sorry, I was not politically correct, I'm listening, I'm learning, and whatnot. And a lot of those people sold their creative souls for whatever show they were on. Maybe they started to have this lavish lifestyle funded by the NBCs of the world, the ABCs of the world. And when something gets dug up, they had to go out and go on an apology tour and say, I'm listening, I'm learning. And Shane didn't say, hey, I'm so sorry. I wish I never did that. He said, I'm a comedian, and this is what comedians do. Like, part of the game, isn't it? And he took his lashings and he continued on. And here's the thing, this is the second thing that comes out of this whole thing with Shane Gillis. Cream rises to the top. In 2019, the gatekeeper of SNL was a lot more important than it is now. Now, I would say gatekeepers still exist in a different way. They're kind of the censorship that goes on with social media because, it wouldn't necessarily be, let's say social media companies did look at what Shane Gillis said and took him off of their platforms. That's when we get into some issues. But they didn't, and they allowed him to continue to be the comedian that he is. And people like him. People will gravitate towards him. And I'm sure somebody will come out with another 4,000 word, not even a hit piece, but why the youth of America, or not even the youth, why the 18 to 35-year-olds love Shane Gillis, why white men love Shane Gillis. And they'll write 4,000 words on it and whatnot. But here's the thing, it doesn't matter. He's still going to sell out shows. People are still going to listen to his podcast. All right? And he's still going to go and host SNL. Now, we've gone from this place in 2019 to where we are now in 2024, where the people's opinion matters a lot more. SNL at this point was telling us what's funny, what's not, and what's okay to joke about. Now, Shane Gillis is saying, hey, SNL, you need me to help boost your show? Okay, I see. Like, we've gone from this really, not even, I would say, like, you had to walk on eggshells at this point in 20, and people got, in this time frame from 2019 to 2024, where we are now, people got so sick of it. They were just like, why are we doing this? We know he's a comedian. And I mean, I'm not, like, here's the thing, SNL is his own show. They can make their own decisions, right? And at that time, they said they wanted him gone. I mean, that's fine. But it's a slippery slope, specifically in comedy. And Shane Gillis continued, and, Cream, at this point, where it was here, went all the way up. Went all the way up. And I think that's good. And I think this is like a culturally important moment. The people won. The people determine what's funny now. It's not what's on at 8 p.m. on NBC anymore. It's like, no, I find this guy funny on TikTok. I find this guy funny on YouTube, on Rumble, whatnot. And these big time corporations, SNL, NBC, they have to listen. And if they don't, you're going to get left behind. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. Alhamdulillah, God gave me everything, brother. And if you enjoyed this video, please like it. Please hit the subscribe. Please comment. Please share it. I appreciate you guys. Going to keep doing these videos. Thank you very much. See you soon.